Hi, and welcome to From Zero to One, an interactive podcast where we talk to founders, innovators, and makers to understand how they went from zero to one, from nothing to something. They will inspire us to create a better and more positive future. So today we have Eugenio Zuccarelli. Hi, Eugenio.
Hi, Hans. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for joining us. And Eugenio is Forbes 30 under 30. And could you please tell us a bit more about yourself?
For sure. I'm a data science manager right now at CVS Health, which is a big company, big corporation in New York and across all of the US, especially in the healthcare spectrum. What we do is mostly data science and artificial intelligence to try and improve the life of people. So trying to use what we know in technology and sometimes also in entrepreneurship to try and have a positive impact on people. And what I've been doing is pretty much spanned a few countries, first in Italy, then in the UK, and now in the US.
Nice. Thank you for joining us. And so before talking about your current projects and how you're improving people's lives at the companies you have been working and you are working, as long as you can tell us about it, we're not breaching any confidentiality. Let's do a step back and think briefly about why did you get into this specific field, which is AI applied to big corporations, or what was the reason why you wanted to study more about data science?
Well, it's a fascinating field because it's full of opportunities. Since the past 20 years, since the beginning of the 21st century, there's been a huge amount of data generated every day in every industry. So not just in healthcare, not just in automotive or finance, but in literally any industry, we have huge amounts of data generated every day. And so, as a lot of people have said, data is the new oil. Data is kind of like a commodity right now, but we can leverage to extract a lot of value. Right now, data is almost more important than oil and most other commodities. So the idea for me was just to say, okay, if the 21st century is going to be based on data and technology is going to be such a strong component of it, well, probably we should all focus more on better understanding data and better being able to extract value from it. And this has been not just artificial intelligence and data science, but even just as leaders, as business, we do have so much more data now that we can leverage. And so the ability to truly know how to use this data to go to better decisions is extremely important too.
Cool. So that's interesting. So data is the new oil, right? And so where did you start getting your hands dirty with such projects and using data, big data?
It's a good question because I started my Bachelor of Science like 10 years ago when the industry was still at the beginning. It was not really anything resembling a Bachelor of Science or a Master of Science in data science. And so I did a few detours. I started in engineering and then I focused at the intersection of engineering and neurosciences, neurotechnologies. And what really helped me was starting to get into initial positions, maybe more in lead base. So trying to get closer to data, closer to analytics. At the beginning, they were not really data science positions, but then that got me closer to these fields. I learned a lot of experiences and doing a lot of projects on the side, like on my own, that also increased my skills by a lot. And that helped for sure.
Nice. So you mentioned neuroscience. Was it a startup, a personal project, or were you working for a company at the time?
The initial focus on neuroscience was more at the first master I did at Imperial College. So that was bioengineering and neurotechnology. So how we can learn from the human brain, from the neurosciences components, and use this information to improve the software that we create, the artificial intelligence systems that we create. By basically learning from the neurons in the brain, we can better improve how we also can make artificial intelligence software. And at the same time, we can also use technology and AI to improve the life of people. And so this is basically the focus of the master I did at Imperial College. And that sparked a lot of interest, a lot of excitement in this field. And then since then, I've been focusing on this more on the data science spectrum and the AI spectrum.
Nice. And how difficult or how easy was to go from academia to the work environment?
It was definitely about learning new skills and having new experiences. I think that to be a good academic, you have to learn specific skills. It's of course more research based. It's a bit more about less deadlines and in unstructured format. And moving to the industry, of course, I had to learn some different skills. First of all, how even more important it is to deal with other people, other teams, be a good teamwork player, and also how it's a bit more structured and more interested, of course, in having tangible KPIs like profits, revenues, and just shorter timeframes as well.
And in terms of finding a job, was it pretty easy for someone with your background to get good offers in this field? How long did it take?
It usually depends, honestly. I would say that the recruitment process is never easy or fast or quick. There's a lot of hoops. I would say that the job, like the data scientist position, and in general the work in AI for every person that is working in this field is a great industry to be in, is a great market to be in. So there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of jobs, and actually in this field of data science and AI, there's more supply than demand. More demand than supply. So there are more companies interested in having employees working in this than the amount of people that can actually fill those positions. So it's a really exciting opportunity.
How long did it take in days for you or months?
Usually in the UK, it takes probably 1 to 2 months. And in the US, it usually takes 1 to 2 weeks.
Much faster. Nice. Do you think, is there any reason behind that? Is it due to regulation as well? Paperwork? Or just more?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the bureaucratic components in Italy are much higher than in the UK, and in the UK even more than in the US. So that's for sure a component. The US is a bit faster in these terms because it's slightly less bureaucratic. Things are slightly easier on that side. But also just because I think in terms of mindset, in the US, people know that if you can get a person faster, of course, they can be contributing faster. You can have higher profits and more revenue, and things can be less costly. And so in the US, it's a bit more geared towards, okay, if they can hire a person faster, they can be ramped up and get started much, much more quickly. And so we can get started with making profits. So it's a bit more of a business mindset than in other countries.
Cool. So what was your path? So you started at a company. What was the size? What was the project? And how did you move to work for a big company like such as CVS?
Yeah, so I started pretty much, studying in the University of Genova. I moved to Imperial College London. I worked for a few years there. And then when I moved to MIT and Harvard in Boston a couple of years ago, that was a great opportunity for me to learn entrepreneurship. Not specifically, opening a fully fledged company, but more about working on projects that had, of course, this strong component of entrepreneurship baked within them. And then I moved on to working in companies, but still with this mindset of having the entrepreneurship mindset, so that it's much easier to work within a big organization, despite all the different problems there.
Nice. Could you tell a bit more about the projects you work on, the startup you joined at the beginning, and walk us through your path?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say probably one great example is at MIT, where we had to do some AI products from the ground up. And that literally checked all of the check marks for everything that is needed in the startup. So we started by understanding better the issue and the problem at hand. MIT has strong connections with a lot of hospitals, a lot of organizations and associations of cardiovascular surgeons, for instance. And so in the cardiovascular space, we knew that there was a big issue, which was that people that have to work there, so surgeons, sometimes struggle in taking decisions in the operating room and in the hospital. So they often have to take split-second decisions about the life or death of people. And sometimes this is based on qualitative measures, just based on their experience. But we knew that thanks to, for instance, artificial intelligence, we could have empowered these doctors in taking better decisions. And so, first of all, it was about understanding their issue, their problem. And then we quickly realized that AI could have helped them, for instance, in developing an app, like an iPhone app, that could have allowed them to make quick predictions on whether a person, a patient, would have survived a specific surgery or not. And powerful, or at least would have been extremely powerful for the doctors, because they would have not just relied on their qualitative experiences, but also on some hard numbers which were coming from other doctors too. So if a doctor can leverage both their intuition and also hundreds of thousands of previous examples from all over the world, that could have been an amazing opportunity for them to take better decisions and ideally save lives too.
That's very exciting and a very impactful project and experience there. So, which kind of machine learning was that? Was that a supervised or unsupervised model?
It's a good question. It was supervised learning. So we had a big data set of approximately 500,000 patient records. So 500,000 people over a few years. And we trained the supervised machine learning model with this data set. And so the model was having input information on the demographics, diagnosis, procedures, and so on of the patients. And the target was knowing a specific surgery, whether that person survived or not. So a binary classification, supervised learning model. And the algorithms we tried a few of the classic ones like XGBoost, logistic regression, and so on. But what's interesting was that how pretty much of the technical components were the easier ones. So developing the machine learning pipeline was actually the easier component. The more complex parts were about getting the trust of the people involved, the doctors that might not understand AI, might not know what a model like that is. So all of those components of entrepreneurship and stakeholder management were the ones that allowed us to thrive and to then also have a success there.
And that's a very good point. So how did you get the understand? I mean, how did people buy into your product, into your app? So how did they trust the solution you have developed for them?
So we started by, first of all, having very close connections with them since the beginning. So we met frequently. We tried to understand from the beginning what were issues, not trying to fit their problem into our mindset, but rather the opposite. So trying to find solutions that were actually answering their problems. And we also decided from the beginning to try and do something which was less complex, much simpler than a deep learning system, because in this way we would have been able to better showcase and explain to the doctors what the product actually was going to. So if you think about the two extremes, on one side you got something very complex. Usually it's very powerful, but it's also not very interpretable, like deep learning solutions. So you have a very powerful system, but it's a black box. Nobody really knows what's inside. Not even data scientists know or can explain to you why it's taking some decisions. And on the other side, you got something very simple, like just a simple linear regression or logistic regression. So something that most folks in economics, even medicine, often do. And so what we decided to do was something closer to linear regression, logistic regression, which were called the decision trees. And in this way, we were able to basically say, okay, the doctor, if we're doing actually simpler models based on decision trees, they're going to be able to understand, like peek under the hood of a model better understand what's inside, how it's taking these decisions and why. And in this way, if I could have seen like the actual reasoning of the model and that had aligned with their thoughts and with their decision making, then they could have gained the trust. Because yes, the machine learning model actually does the same actions that I would take as a doctor.
Nice. That's great. This is very important to start small and think big, right? So start with a small step and something working easily, and an MVP, and then tweak it as you get more feedback. So it's interesting. So what excites you the most about this space right now? This space.
I'd say probably the fact that it's still an industry and an environment with a lot of growth, a lot of opportunities, and a lot of creativity too. So it's got massive growth. And even in big companies, like even in the one I'm working in right now, you can see how there are a lot of components of creativity and not well-defined playbooks. So a lot of teams actually have to create their own playbooks. They have to create their own best practices, and sometimes taking from the playbook of entrepreneurship. So a lot of times, for instance, for me and my team, is about developing MVPs, so minimum viable products, shipping them quickly, and then putting them in production, putting them in front of the clients. So it's a lot of opportunities to grow and also to kind of like chart your own path and doing things creatively, which is not usually the case in other industries.
That's interesting. So now we come to some classic questions of this podcast, which is, how did you get from 0 to 1, and what's one for you? What's your definition of one?
It's a good question. I would say that to me, it's always a moving target. So one is never what I am right now, but it's always a few steps ahead, and this target always moves. So it used to be, let's say, that MIT was the target. MIT was the one for me, especially growing up. It was a big goal for a child coming from a relatively small town. So that was for sure something that acts kind of like as a North Star for me. And I feel like I started from zero, like most people do. And one was going into a good university, getting a good job and so on. Now, one, it's still a few steps ahead. It's never something that I feel I've reached. And so that's also something which I think gives me a lot of excitement, because it's always about trying to strive for something better and something more, and which is never about settling down to what we have right now.
It's a very good point. I think, yeah, improvement and growth is a very, very strong motivation for everyone, and yeah, that's actually that's a very good mindset. Growth mindset is something that helps you to achieve greater heights, and it makes you also happier. People studying how people get into state of flow. They describe this, struggling and kind of doing difficult stuff and having fun. That's actually something that helps you also to be in a better state, better flow state when you work on something bigger than you. That's very cool. So a similar question related to this, like, is what valuable company nobody is building right now?
Wow. I would say probably a company trying to solve the simple questions of the healthcare industry, I would say. So if you see in the healthcare industry, we have amazing technologies like artificial intelligence, right? And that's what we are doing right now. We're doing cool AI predicting diseases or doing a lot of fancy stuff. But we often see that in the healthcare industry, we lack the basics, right? We lack good data. We lack systems that talk to each other, what's usually called interoperability. So if we go from one doctor to another, it's not always the case that data speak to each other or computers speak to each other. And so we often lack the basics, even just in how these data are created. A lot of times we still have doctors that write notes down, they're not digital, And this is even worse if we go across countries. Like it's always me, it's always my health. But if I go from Italy to the UK to the US, like forget about having data connected across countries because it's not even connected within the same country, within the same healthcare system. And so I'll say a great company to build is someone that can actually solve the basic issues on the data side, on the technology side, for hospitals and for the healthcare sector, just because it's a massive industry. And if you can unlock data for such a big industry, you can then generate huge amounts of data that can feed a lot of new different companies.
That's great. I really believe there is a lot of improvement to be made there, and part of it is actually how you convince people to trust your models and your results. But you said that starting small with an MVP and involving the stakeholders into the project, it's a good way of reaching consensus and probably adoption, which is a great learning. So, for those who are listening and watching us and they're starting their career into data science and also in tech, how did from 0 to 1? Let's say 1 is being a data science leader as you are, nominated by Fortune 100, TEDx speaker, and also Forbes 30 under 30. How what do you recommend? I mean, what's your takeaway to the listeners, and what should they focus on, practical steps to work toward that direction these days?
I would say to definitely have an entrepreneurial mindset, not just in the work that they do, but in also the soft skills and kind of like their career. I tend to think of myself not just as an employee of a company. I tend to not get identified with my job, but rather with my career or my industry and what I want to do. So I really think that everybody should try and understand better what do they want to do. What is their big goal, what is their identity, and then kind of like chart their own path in this way. And I think that having an entrepreneurial mindset where you can see yourself a bit more of a hustler, someone that can maybe focus on one company, but at the same time do other things, write about it, talk about it, and do other things within that realm helps a lot because it allows you to diversify your portfolio and your experiences, and also kind of like become a subject matter expert in that area. So being very scrappy, resourceful is definitely something that helped me for sure, and I think also will help a lot of other people.
Great, and maybe expose yourself to new things, right? Then not be scared of trying new stuff. As that's maybe something related to what you said about being a hustler and struggling and struggler and entrepreneurial mindset. So
always, yeah, I think that's probably one of the most important things, because we have to. Everybody's afraid, at whatever point between 0 and 1, everybody's always afraid of taking on new challenges and getting on new endeavors. But I think what's exciting is the fact that if we understand that everybody's afraid and we just have to be brave about taking on new challenges, then that's how you unlock new opportunities. And a lot of times these opportunities are great.
nice. And so, on a final note, so what's next for you, Eugenio? Are you thinking about, potentially building something by yourself on your own, or joining big other projects, other fields in the future that interests you a lot? Or
Yeah.
any
Yeah, right now what I like to do is move on the entrepreneurial side. So opening a startup, it's a bit of a question whether in Italy or the US or the UK, but ideally that's the goal. A startup that can solve concrete issues and ideally can do this with machine learning and data analytics. But the focus is more about solving a big problem, a big ambitious problem that affects a lot of people.
Great. And hopefully we'll be getting you back, having you back here at the podcast next year or whenever it suits your schedule, telling us more about your project and hopefully improving lives of millions or even billions of people, right?
I'd love to.
Thank you so much, Eugenio. I know we are running short of time and you have a busy schedule. So I would say thank you so much for joining us today. Is there any way people can reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. I love to get in touch with anyone on social media, on LinkedIn, on Twitter. My handle is usually J Zuccarelli, or you can find me just by my name and surname.
Yeah, we'll tag Eugenio on the social posts that we'll make. So you'll be sure to find his contacts as well. Thank you again so much, Eugenio, for being with us today and for sharing your knowledge and your experience from 0 to 1, and also your understanding of 1, which is, as you said, an iterating aim objective that is always in front of you, which is a very, very interesting perspective compared to the ones that I've heard so far. And I would say it's very, very centered, on growth mindset, which is great. And thank you for everyone to listening to joining us today. And hopefully we will see you again in the next episode of From 0 to 1. And if you have any questions, just post it below, and we and Eugenio will be happy to answer your questions as well in comments. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Eugenio, again. See you.
Thank you, Hans.